They took my land, built 35 homes, and called it community development. But they didn't know whose land they'd stolen. When the rains came and the dam gates stood between justice and chaos, I made my choice. I didn't scream. I didn't fight. I simply opened the dam. I still remember the day I bought that piece of land. 25 acres of quiet hills, golden in the morning sun, and kissed by a stream that twisted through the valley like a silver thread. My father used to say, "Land is not just dirt. It's your story written on earth." For years, I protected that story, planted trees, built a small wooden cabin, and lived a life most people only dream about. Until the HOA came. It started with a letter, neat, official, and full of words that looked harmless. "We are developing a residential community under the Silver Creek Housing Association." I didn't think much of it. The map attached showed land near mine, not mine. But a month later, bulldozers rolled over my boundary fence like it was made of paper. They didn't stop. I ran down the hill, shouting, waving my arms. A man in a hard hat looked at me like I was trespassing on my own land. "Sir, you're not allowed here," he said flatly. "Not allowed? This is my land!" He didn't answer. He just pointed at a paper pinned to a wooden post. A government seal on top, my name nowhere on it. That was the first time I heard the name. Silver Creek HOA, a private housing association that claimed my valley as part of their expansion zone. They said the land had been reclassified. Within weeks, trucks came and went. Concrete foundations appeared. A row of identical beige houses began crawling across the land I once called mine. I fought. I went to the county office, lawyers, surveyors, anyone who'd listen. But every time, I got the same polite smile and the same answer. It's complicated. Meanwhile, my cabin turned into an island surrounded by construction noise. Every morning, the sound of hammers replaced the sound of birds. Every evening, floodlights burned through the mist, like prison towers. The HOA's president, a man named Richard Cole, finally visited one morning. He wore a perfect white shirt and sunglasses that reflected my face like a ghost. "Mr. Asher," he said, "we appreciate your cooperation. Once the development's complete, we'll compensate you for any inconvenience." "Inconvenience?" I asked, half laughing. "You built 35 houses on my land." He smiled. "Progress sometimes hurts, sir. You can't stand in the way of community growth." And just like that, he turned his back on me, as if I were nothing but a weed to be cleared. The rains came earlier that year, heavy, relentless, and angry, as if the sky itself was on my side. The Silver Creek Dam, sitting above the valley, had been my pride. My father and I built it years ago. A small stone barrier to store water for irrigation. The new HOA ignored it completely. Their homes stood directly in its flood path. They built without studying the terrain, without permission, without respect. And I watched. Each night I sat by the dam, listening to the thunder roll across the valley. The water level rose inch by inch, pressing harder against the gates. I checked the gauges like I always did. Habit, maybe love, and wondered how much more the valley could take. Then one morning, I woke up to find tire tracks leading straight through my field. HOA engineers had tampered with the dam's drainage to redirect water for their landscaping project. They didn't even ask. That was the day something inside me cracked. I tried reasoning again. I sent letters, warnings, emails, all ignored. They laughed. Richard even said, "If that dam ever bursts, you'll be the one we'll sue." That night, I sat in my cabin as lightning danced over the hills. The rain pounded the roof. The power went out. In the darkness, I could hear the distant hum of generators down in the new community. My land, my story, was now covered in concrete and arrogance. Then came the sound, deep and growing, the sound of water clawing at stone. I went outside. The air was thick with mist and rage. The dam gates stood before me like two enormous doors holding back fate itself. I touched the cold metal, remembering the day my father first closed them. His words echoed, "This dam will protect us, son. But never forget, nature always takes back what's hers." By dawn, the valley below was still, silent even. No one knew how close they were to disaster. The HOA families slept peacefully in homes built on stolen soil. I walked to the lever. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of justice. As I placed my hand on the rusted wheel, I saw the reflection of my cabin light in the water's surface, shaking like a heartbeat. I took a deep breath and turned it. The gate groaned, then screamed. The water surged forward like a living thing, roaring, unstoppable. From the hilltop, I watched as the flood ripped through the valley, swallowing the roads, the fences, the neatly painted houses one by one. Streetlights flickered and died. The roar became silence. The land exhaled. The sound of rushing water faded into the distance, replaced by an eerie silence that hung over the valley like a ghost that refused to leave. The first rays of dawn cut through the mist, painting streaks of gold over what was left of Silver Creek Valley, where 35 brand-new homes once stood, proud and gleaming. Now, there was only ruin. Broken rooftops floated in muddy water, garden fences twisted like paper, and cars lay half-buried under layers of wet silt. The HOA's shining dream had turned into a drowned memory overnight. I stood on the ridge above the valley, my boots sinking into the soaked earth. My breath came out in clouds, heavy and cold. From up there, the destruction looked almost peaceful. Not chaotic, not violent, just inevitable. For years, I had watched that land be stolen piece by piece, each truckload of concrete burying the memories I'd built with my father. And now, as the water slowly settled back into its natural course, I realized something. The land wasn't gone. It had only been waiting for its moment to breathe again. But peace never lasts long when money and power are involved. By mid-morning, the sirens began. Distant at first, then louder. Police cars, fire trucks, rescue teams. The air filled with the whir of helicopter blades slicing through the valley fog. From above, they must have seen everything. The broken homes, the flooded streets, and one lone figure standing by the dam. That figure was me. When the officers climbed up to where I stood, their faces were pale, eyes wide with disbelief. One of them shouted over the noise of the choppers, "Sir, step away from the controls!" I didn't move. The dam's lever still rested halfway open, water trickling gently now. Calm, almost innocent. I said, "Step away." The officer yelled again, his hand near his holster. I turned slowly and looked him in the eyes. "It's done," I said quietly. "You can't stop water that's already found its way home." They cuffed me without a struggle. Mud squelched under our feet as they led me down the slope. I didn't resist. I didn't speak. The world around me was shouting. Radio chatter, engines, drones buzzing. But inside, there was only silence. At the bottom of the hill, the HOA's president, Richard Cole, stood soaked and trembling, his once perfect white shirt clinging to his skin. He saw me and shouted, voice cracking, "You destroyed everything! You'll pay for this, you lunatic!" I met his gaze for a moment. "You built on what wasn't yours," I said. "I just reminded you of who it belonged to." He lunged forward, furious, but officers held him back. His expensive shoes sank into the mud, and for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. Not anger. Fear. Maybe because deep down, he knew he'd started this. They took me away as cameras clicked and reporters screamed questions I didn't care to answer. Did you open the dam intentionally? Was this revenge? Do you feel any remorse for what happened to the residents? Remorse? For the land that was taken? For the family heritage that was erased under HOA paperwork and developer greed? No. The only thing I felt was relief. Not joy, not pride, just relief. At the county jail, they put me in a small cell that smelled of rain and old paint. The power flickered a few times that night. Every time it did, I saw flashes of the flood again. The rush, the roar, the silence afterward. But in those visions, I didn't see tragedy. I saw cleansing. When the trial began, the courtroom was packed. Reporters filled every seat. Microphones pointed like weapons. The headlines were already everywhere. Local man destroys HOA community by opening dam. 35 homes lost. Owner blames HOA corruption. Hero or villain? The man behind Silver Creek flood. The prosecution painted me as a monster. They showed pictures of crying families, lost homes, twisted metal. They spoke about damages worth millions, but none of them showed the before pictures. Of the forest they had torn down, of the stream they buried, of the home they crushed under concrete. When it was my turn to speak, I stood up slowly. I wasn't wearing a suit like their lawyers or polished shoes like their witnesses. I wore the same weathered jacket I'd worn the night the dam opened. My father and I built that dam to protect our land, I began, to feed our crops, to keep the valley alive. But these people, these developers, they took what wasn't theirs. They called it progress. They built their homes on stolen ground. I paused, letting my words echo in the silent courtroom. They say I destroyed 35 houses, but they destroyed something far older, far deeper. And when nature took back what was hers, I just didn't stand in the way. Murmurs spread across the room. Some faces looked angry, some thoughtful. Even the judge's stern expression faltered for a moment. In the end, the verdict didn't surprise me. Guilty of reckless endangerment and property destruction. They sentenced me to 10 years, but punishment means nothing when you've already lost everything. Time inside the cell passed differently. Days bled into nights, and nights into memories. The guards barely spoke. Some whispered about the dam man, the one who drowned the HOA. A few even nodded at me in quiet respect. Months later, a reporter visited for an interview. She was young, sharp-eyed, the kind who didn't just chase headlines, but truth. "Do you regret what you did?" she asked softly. I looked out the small window at the gray clouds gathering again. "If you build your house on stolen land," I said, "you should expect the earth to rise against you one day." She wrote something in her notebook, then asked, "What do you think will happen to Silver Creek now?" I smiled faintly. "It'll grow again. It always does." And I was right. While I sat in prison, nature began its slow reclamation. The floodwaters receded, leaving behind fertile soil. Grass sprouted where driveways once ran. The broken streets cracked open with wild flowers. Birds returned. Trees began to grow again along the river's edge. Eventually, the county declared Silver Creek Valley uninhabitable. No one rebuilt. The HOA dissolved, their funds drained in lawsuits and insurance claims. Richard Cole vanished from the news after filing bankruptcy. But something else happened too. Something I didn't expect. People started calling the valley Asher's Creek. Locals began visiting it not as a disaster site, but as a symbol. They said it reminded them that greed has limits, that nature always has the final say. 10 years later, when I was released, I went back. The road was different now, half-broken, overgrown with moss and wild vines. The silence was thick but not empty. It was alive. I reached the top of the hill where my cabin once stood. Nothing remained but the foundation stones and a few rusted nails. But the view, oh, the view was the same. The river glimmered in the sunlight, winding freely through the valley like a silver ribbon. I walked to the edge where the dam once stood. The gates were gone, collapsed years ago, But the stream still followed the same path my father and I carved. I knelt, scooping a handful of cool water in my palms. It slipped through my fingers, just as time had. But unlike time, the land had forgiven me. From across the valley I saw wild deer grazing where the HOA clubhouse once stood. The air smelled of wet soil and freedom. A young couple walked by. Hikers, maybe. They stopped when they saw me. "Are you the man who opened the dam?" the girl asked quietly. I smiled, a tired but peaceful smile. I just let the water go where it was meant to. They nodded respectfully and walked on. As the sun dipped low behind the hills, the golden light spread across the valley. The same light that had once blessed this land when I first called it mine. For a long moment, I just stood there, listening to the whisper of the wind, the murmur of the river, and the faint echo of my father's voice. Land remembers, son. It always remembers. I closed my eyes, feeling the wind brush against my face like forgiveness. The HOA was gone. The greed was gone. But the land, my land, was alive again. And in that living silence, I finally found peace.